took firefighter Drexler, who had unplugged at this point. They put his hood over his mask, and he sort of had him down in a corner breathing the fresh air that they could find while he was trying to make noise and shine his flashlight, looking for a RIT team to come in.
Stay tuned. Coming up in this episode, it's part one of my two-part interview with members of the command staff of the Atascocita Fire Department in Texas as we discuss a commercial building fire that resulted in a mayday from a crew that became disoriented to their surroundings and then ran out of air. But first, let's hear from our amazing sponsor, Midwest Fire. Every day, the hard-working men and women at Midwest Fire build the most reliable firefighting apparatus to be found anywhere. Their customers know a well-built fire engine means lives and property saved. Midwest Fire, a factory direct manufacturer dedicated to helping you extinguish fire before it becomes a raging beast. To learn more about what fuels their passion, visit MidwestFire.com. Hello and welcome to episode 303 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this program is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SAMatters mission is simple. We want to help you and the members of your team see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota, having just returned from conducting situational awareness training for the management team of the Novelis Corporation in Oswego, New York, and a program for the Lincoln County Fire Chiefs Association near Charlotte, North Carolina. Today's feature segment is sponsored by the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The Academy trains and certifies your members on situational awareness skills essential for improving high-risk decision-making outcomes. To learn more about this highly acclaimed program, visit SAMatters.com and click on the Online Academy tab under the Training section at the top of the homepage. Okay, let's jump into today's feature segment, part one of my two-part interview with members of the command staff of the Atascocita Fire Department in Texas, talking about a commercial building fire that resulted in a mayday from a crew that became disoriented to their surroundings and then ran out of air. Hey everyone, Rich Gassaway here, host of the Situational Awareness Matters show, and today I have three guests with me from Atascocita Fire Department in Texas, where they had a near-miss event at a commercial building fire, and they agreed to come on and talk with us about the event and what happened and what they learned from it. So I'm going to welcome you guys, and I'm going to have you introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your backgrounds, and then somebody, whichever of you is the winner or the loser, can then tell us about the town and the department. So whoever wants to go first, just start the introductions.
Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Brian Mulligan. I'm a battalion chief with the Atascocita Fire Department. I'm a volunteer there. My full-time job is I'm a captain with Cypress Creek Fire Department. I've been in the fire service for 14 years. 11 years of that time, I've been full-time paid somewhere, in addition to volunteering with Atascocita.
Okay. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
My name's David Roark. I'm a full-time battalion chief with Atascocita Fire Department. Started off my career at Cypress Creek Fire Department, where Brian works as a volunteer. And I've been for about 9 years. Where Brian works full time. I've been in the fire service for about 9 years and have been working with Atascocita for about 3.
Okay. My name is Mike Mulligan. I'm the Chief of Department for the Atascocita Fire Department. I've been in the fire service since 1985. Came up through the ranks, worked my way through all the positions in the department, and was appointed Fire Chief in Atascocita in 2015. This is the only place I work and the only organization that I'm affiliated with, so no shameless plugs for other departments for me.
Now, for those who were really cued in and paying attention with strong situational awareness, two of you have the same last name. What's that story about?
Yeah, Brian is my son. He started in the fire service at 6 years old, going literally to calls with me when I was an assistant chief with my volunteer department back in Indiana. I spent 25 years as a volunteer before I got into this. When the Yankees call you to pitch, you go pitch, right? So I left my career job as an engineer and got into the fire service full time in 2011 as the deputy chief here at Atascocita. And Brian and I have been kicking around fire stations pretty much all his life. So that's, he, got the heartstrings pulled for the family biz, I guess, if you want to quote a backdraft quote there.
Yeah,
so,
right.
He didn't have a choice in the world, as it turned out. So,
Brian, has he taught you well, or have you had to unlearn the lessons that Dad has taught you?
No, he's taught me pretty well, and he's been the little voice in the back of my head a couple of times.
Uh-huh.
Pretty well, just pretty well.
Very well, exceptionally.
I'm glad the two of you are separated right now.
Or so are we.
Yeah, Chief, before we begin the show, you wanted to make a dedication, so we're going to pause and allow you to do that.
So the event that we're going to talk about today involved a lieutenant with our fire department who made it through this event virtually unscathed. Unfortunately, several weeks later, he was driving home and died in a car crash. His name was Jared Snell. He was a good man, a good father, a patriot. He served in the military as a firefighter in the Air Force, and came back and served with the Baytown Fire Department here in Texas, and then came to Atascocita as a lieutenant when we did our first full-time employee hiring. We miss Jared a lot, and I'd like to dedicate our efforts in this podcast and the education that goes out to everybody to Lieutenant Jared Snell. So Atascocita is a 25 square mile area of unincorporated Harris County, surrounded on four sides by two different cities: the city of Houston on three sides, and the city of Humble, which is spelled Humble, but we don't pronounce the H, on the fourth side. We are a combination department made up of around 129 members, including about 60 volunteers. We have 23 or so part-time folks, and the remainder are paid personnel. So about 50% of the department is paid. They receive a paycheck. Some are part-time, some are full-time. We cover 74,000 residents out of 3 fire stations and a headquarters building. We have 26 pieces of rolling stock, and we provide a full-service all hazards fire department. We do rescue, we do swift water, we do structural firefighting, we do hazmat awareness and ops. We have a countywide hazmat team that handles the heavy lifting on that. That particular department also does fire marshal services. So although we do pre-planning, we're not part of the prevention side because we have a county mandate that the county fire marshal manages that effort. We have a group of individuals called our personnel and logistics group, which does our rehab, our firefighter rehab. And then we also operate a full EOC with section chiefs that's run by our local ham radio group, which is an interesting combination. But we've never been in an incident where we were without communications, because our ham folks are set up in our emergency communications center at our other fire station. And then they also provide the section chief responsibilities and things like that for our EOC. And our countywide EOC doesn't like us to call ourselves an EOC. They prefer we called ourselves the Department Operations Center, but we're kind of rebellious over here, so we'll do what we want. So.
Do you have staffing on duty daily?
Yeah, we staff 3 personnel per pumper, 24/7 at all 3 of our fire stations. We also have 24/7 coverage with 2 part-timers on our tower, and our ambulances are staffed with at least a paramedic and an EMT 24/7, and we have 3 ALS units that are running all the time. And then we have various command staff. We also have a full-time battalion chief that manages the shift on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. You went pretty quick there, but I'm going to try to do the math on this. So 3 engines with 3 people, 1 tower with 2 people, 3 EMS units with 2 people, 1 battalion chief. Did I get all of them?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. All right. Do you guys use any kind of mutual aid or auto aid?
Yeah, we use both. We have a countywide mutual aid agreement through the Harris County Firefighters Association, which means I can call any department in the county who's a signatory to that organization or to that agreement, and request specialized equipment or additional alarms. We have automatic aid that we've built into our box cards that kind of forces the issue with our surrounding departments. So on a commercial box alarm, we typically get 1 outside engine plus our 3 engines in our tower. And that usually brings another chief to the scene, because the departments around here have, because of some mixed matched communications infrastructure, we need a unified command system in order to make sure that we can communicate with all companies on scene.
What do you mean mismatched communications?
Well, we operate right now on an 800 megahertz system that's run by the county. Several of the departments that touch our boundaries operate on a UHF system. So we have patching capabilities, but that becomes a little cumbersome sometimes, doesn't work as well as we'd like it to. So it's better for me to have their battalion chief or their assistant chief or their fire chief standing next to me or next to our incident commander in a unified command post.
Okay. Does that create some challenges, or is it pretty well managed?
No, it's pretty well managed. Our dispatch center, most of the departments that we interact with run out of the same common dispatching center. So they're able to do patching on the back end. Just takes a little while for that to get set up. So if a pumper from the East Tex Fire Department shows up on scene with their battalion chief, I want their battalion chief next to me until I can ensure that I can talk to his people. Otherwise I want to be able to turn to him and say, hey, where are those guys? Or, and it's not just me. I mean, I'm not on every call. Obviously, I've got battalion chiefs and other assistant chiefs that are managing those incidents as well. And that's kind of what we've migrated into. It also gives us we operate under the blue card system. And so in doing that, we know that we have to staff positions with chief level officers. And it's nice to have each one of those responding departments send a chief, because I get additional command level officers that I wouldn't otherwise have. So I'm not taking a lieutenant or a captain off a fire truck and pulling them away from their crew to manage Division Alpha. I've got a battalion chief that's literally going to be there to, from another department who can manage that situation at a command level.
Sure. The incident in question, I should have preempted you guys with this one. Do you know the date that occurred?
July 3rd.
Yeah. Yes, we do. As a matter of fact.
July 3rd of what year?
2019.
Oh, okay. Very recent. And then, do you know what day of the week that was?
It was a Wednesday, I think.
Wednesday. Okay.
Was it a Wednesday, Brian? Wednesday or Thursday?
Okay. Weekday. And then, what was the weather like that day in Texas on July 3rd? I think I can answer this one.
It was a cool day. It
Really?
started off as a pretty cool day.
Yeah, given the time of year, absolutely.
Yeah. It was like low to mid 80s.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we know that's not cool for Minnesota, but
Right. It was
cool for us.
It was high humidity, and there was wind coming in from the south, which sort of played into how the incident unfolded a little bit.
Yeah, when you see the video, you'll see the first arrival video. The wind looks considerably stronger than it actually was reported as. The wind was reported from 2 to 5 miles an hour, and I'd have bet you a paycheck when I pulled into the parking lot that it was at least 10. But
okay, and then describe for me what things were like. What time of the day did the call come in?
it was morning.
Yeah, it came in about 9 o'clock.
Yeah,
9 o'clock.
About 9.
Okay, and did you have all your regular staffing on duty that day?
Yeah, so that was actually kind of a unique deal. We're fairly well spread out across the district. Our district's very long, so we have a station on either end of the district. We got a station right in the middle of the district, and we were doing some training that morning. So everybody was over to one side of the district, and this incident happened in sort of the middle to east side, or the middle to west side, and everyone was over on the east side of the district. So we had all of our fire personnel in one spot.
And we had literally just finished a residential box alarm, which turned out to be nothing.
Right.
But everyone had mustered and gone to that call, and they were on their way back.
Yeah.
Or already back at Station 19, which is on the extreme east side of the district.
Okay, and how did the call come in? What did dispatch say when they toned you guys out?
So it toned out as a confined appliance fire, which is really interesting because the box that had just cleared for us also went out as a confined appliance fire. Just, weird coincidence, but it came out as a confined appliance fire, which we sent one pumper and myself as the full-time battalion chief that day. So we were both originally assigned to the call, and then they immediately upgraded it to a full box alarm commercial fire with multiple callers.
Okay, and did they identify what the commercial building was when they dispatched you?
Yes, over both in our notes and over the radio, they said that it was Coach's Sports Bar on 1960.
Coach's Sports Bar.
Yes.
Yeah, and think honky tonk or roadhouse. It's a wood frame, metal walls. It was insulated inside. I mean, it wasn't just sheet metal like you'd see at an ice house or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it was. But the exterior was. That was what the exterior looked like. It had a corrugated metal roof, and it was 8,000 square feet, almost 9,000 square feet of open space inside. Very little partitioning. Maybe back along the back wall where the kitchen was the only real partitioning to the space.
And prior to the fire, had any of you been patrons of this business so that you had?
Actually, it's funny that you bring that up. That one of the things that led to the issue that we ran into was that Lieutenant Snell was apparently the architect of the building, and he knew the building extremely well, which played into some confidence issues that we had to address during the after action. So.
Okay. All right. Well, so we'll put a pause on that and come back to that. For the three of you, had any of the three of you been in the building before?
No, never. Absolutely not. No.
I'd been one time when it was still a place called Mulligan's.
Literally called Mulligan's.
No relation?
No.
Yeah.
None that they claim.
Right. And I'd been in there one time on an ambulance call way back in like 2007.
Okay.
But apparently, based on the pictures I saw, it hadn't changed much since I was in there in 2007. So.
Okay. So you get a report of a confined appliance fire at the Coach's Sports Bar. Then it's upgraded to a full box alarm. What information did dispatch share with you that indicated the need to upgrade the call?
Just that they had multiple callers that were confirming a building fire.
Okay. And of the three of you, David, you were the first in of the three of you?
No, I wasn't. So,
Actually, I was first. So our headquarters building is about a quarter of a mile south on the same road.
Okay.
So this building sits in a strip mall parking lot. So it's separate from the strip mall. Well, was. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was separate from the strip mall in the parking lot on the corner of two heavily traveled roads, Timber Forest Drive and Farm to Market Road 1960. And ultimately, if you go south of 1960 from this location, our headquarters building is about a quarter of a mile down on the right-hand side. And so I was responding to the residential fire that had just cleared. And I went in when we got canceled. I went about my morning routine. I went and got my car washed and was doing some other things and pulled into my parking spot, literally put the car in park, or put my department ride, my buggy in park, and the box tones or the appliance fire came in. And I said, oh, well, okay, I won't worry about that because it's an appliance fire and I have people, I got stuff I need to get to, so I'll just stay here. And it might have been, 15 seconds. So before I'd gotten out of my buggy to come into the office, the box tones dropped. Okay, well, now that's a whole different kettle of fish, right? So I'm here and someone needs to get there and figure out what's going on and lay the groundwork and the game plan, blah, blah, blah. So that's what I went through in my head. I pulled out of the parking lot. I made a left onto Timber Forest heading north. And within about 10 seconds, 15, maybe 20 seconds on the outside, I could see the header. And in the video, you'll see, because we have dash cam video from my vehicle, I pulled into the parking lot and immediately started transmitting my initial radio report. It was a medium to large size commercial structure, single story with heavy smoke showing from all sides. I was pushing out of the eaves, and ultimately what it looked like to me and what it actually was were two different things. So it looked to me like the fire was pushing, or that the smoke was pushing out of all of the eaves. What it ultimately was is the smoke was pushing out of the back and then being blown around the building by the wind. And the humidity was holding it down close to the road. So it was literally obscuring 1960, which is the main 5-lane roadway that's right adjacent to it, because it was literally blowing across the road. And so I pulled up onto what was the address side of the building on 1960 and made a 360 in my vehicle. I had already seen the Charlie side. I pulled around to the front, went around to the Delta side, came back around to the front and positioned myself off of what would traditionally be the Alpha Bravo corner. And so about that time, engine 19 was first. Engine 19 was coming down 1960. And as I pulled back around the front of the building, I saw them coming. So I started to give them staging or positioning instructions. Well, as time elapsed, they were literally pulling into the driveway as I was telling them where I wanted them. And if you listen to the audio on the recording, there's some confusion that kind of sets the stage for what's going to happen in the future. Because where I was sitting on the Alpha side, I had moved Alpha division to what would be the east side of the building. So think Alpha side is on the north side. That's the traditional Alpha or address side is on the north. The east side of the building is where I wanted them to position because the smoke was blowing over the Alpha side. And I didn't want the pump operator standing in this smoke or having to try to wear an air pack the entire call It just didn't make any sense. We could go in from the other side. So I moved everything to the other side. Well, the Lieutenant, Jared Snell, he didn't quite register that. I mean, that didn't completely click. And we, as I said before, Lieutenant Snell's not with us anymore. And before we could get to, we had scheduled an after-action report the day that Tropical Storm Imelda happened. So that kind of blew the after-action report out of the water. And we moved, I think it was that Friday after Imelda that Jared passed away. And then the after-action report was a week or so after that, by the time we finally got everybody back in town. And, so we never had an opportunity to debrief him outside of his statement and some drawings that he provided for the initial after-action report. So we never got to clear all that up. But from the looks of things, he never fully registered that I had moved the Alpha Division. We've since changed that process in our department, that Alpha will always be the address side, so that everyone's working off of what they've always been taught. And even though it's a perfectly acceptable practice to move Alpha Division, we're not going to do that anymore, because it literally put the stake in the ground for everything that transpired that led up to the Mayday.
Okay. So there was a little initial confusion on the geographic identifiers of the building. All right. So keep us trekking on the timeline here.
Okay. So once a command was established, we got Engine 19 positioned on what would traditionally be the Bravo side, but was now the Alpha side. They forced entry through a door on that side. And unfortunately, without knowing at that point where the fire was located, see the fire was in the building, my efforts to keep them out of harm's way outside of the building caused them to have to pull their hand line all the way across the building to get to where the seat of the fire was.
Describe the conditions as you were seeing them on the exterior when the crew was starting to make their interior push?
So we had brown turbulent smoke showing outside, but no fire. And that was basically it. I mean, that's what we saw. I mean, that's what I saw.
There was one car in the back of the building that Chief saw on his 360, and we had another civilian let us know, hey, there's a car back there. I don't know if anyone's in there. So we thought maybe a cook or someone had come in to prep for lunch and something had happened. We obviously weren't sure what was going on, but we didn't know that the building was empty, right? And then I can tell you, I mean, when they opened the front door, it was, floor to ceiling, 5 feet visibility or less. There's a lot of smoke.
Okay. So somewhere in this, our second engine comes in. They start to establish a water supply. Their crew goes on, or the initial crew was assigned to take a pre-connected hand line into the building for fire suppression and primary search. Because again, I've got a car outside and I don't know what their staffing is or how they manage that. So second engine comes in. They hand jack a 5-inch supply line from a hydrant to their engine, while supplying the attack engine, Engine 19, with water from their tank, which is a tactic that we use all the time. Their crew took a second hand line to support Engine 19's position inside and help with fire suppression and primary search. And then the third engine showed up within 45 seconds.
Right, because they're all coming from the same place.
Yeah, so they showed up about 45 seconds later, and they were assigned to the on-deck position in Alpha, which again was on the east side of the building. So, and that pretty much set the stage for the crews that were going to be operating. Our Tower 19 showed up with one crew member. Our training captain brought that because it was a commercial building. That truck was assigned to the box alarm. We also had aerial apparatus coming from 2 other departments because we'd only just started staffing the tower at that point in time. So dispatch hadn't modified the run cards to the way our dispatch works. Obviously, if a truck isn't staffed, they're going to call the next closest of that type, right? Just like everybody else's does. So they gave us at least one other one, and another department from up north, that's what they responded with, was their tower. So we had our two towers, and another, I think Ladder 46 showed up at one point in time from East Tex, but not 100% sure of that. But anyway, so
hold on a second. When that first engine that made the entry, what was that engine number?
engine 19.
And was Jared on that engine?
Yes, he was a lieutenant on that engine.
All right. And when engine 19 made entry, how many on that engine were on the line? 2?
There were 3.
3.
So yeah, so there was a firefighter at the doorway who was feeding line in to Jared and his other firefighter who were pulling the hose into the seat of the fire.
Okay. And when they made entry, what other apparatus did you have on the scene at that time?
Engine 29 had just pulled up, and they were deploying a second hand line to assist engine 19.
What's their crew size?
They also had 4. So there was a pump operator, or there was an engine operator, and then there was the lieutenant and 2 firefighters.
Okay, let me back up to when you were telling me the on-duty staffing, because I thought there were 3 engines with 3 on an engine. Was there something exceptional about the staffing?
Yeah, we've been going through a transitional phase where we use part-timers who are qualified to drive until our full-time people get their driver operator certifications. So we have 3 full-time people assigned to a pumper, but we still had a 4th firefighter assigned. And so it just so happens on this particular day, we were fat with people, more so than we would be. Like I'm not sure where we're staffed at today, but we still have some overlap where we're still using a 4th person, regularly. But that's not the typical assignment going forward.
How unusual. What typically happens is the department is exceptionally thin on the day that the big event occurs. So good for you that you had that 4th person on each of those engines. All right, so you got 2 engines on the scene. 19's taking a line through a door with a heavy smoke condition. 29 is pulling a second line.
Right.
Line sizes 1 3/4.
We use a key hose, which is 1 7/8".
Okay.
It packs like 1 3/4, but it'll expand to 1 7/8". And then did he have the? He had the fog. He had the indicator.
Yeah, he had a 200-gallon fog nozzle, and then the second crew was pulling our vindicator nozzle, which is about 300 gallons a minute.
Okay. All right.
So they made their way in, and the configuration you'll see in some of the drawings in the presentation that. There's a stairway. It's about a 3-step stairway from the ground floor up onto the elevated bar area. And they made their way in through a series of pool tables. But one of the things that occurred, well, I'll leave that for David because he was Division Alpha that morning. So at some point in there, Battalion 29, which was Chief Mulligan, showed up. Battalion Chief Mulligan showed up as Battalion 29, and he took the Charlie Delta corner. And again, with the confusion, the other thing that we didn't talk about up to now is we were assigned a fireground channel at dispatch, but not everybody had switched over to the fireground channel. So at one point in time, there was communications happening with our dispatch center on the fireground channel and on our primary dispatch channel. So I was on the fireground channel when I gave the initial radio report and made the change in assignment of Division Alpha. Not everybody was.
Okay, let me pause and ask you a question. Historically, has that been an issue?
Yes.
Okay, so this wasn't an anomaly of a problem. It was a problem that you've experienced before.
Yes.
Okay. All right, continue.
Yeah. So when Brian showed up on scene as Battalion 29, he had been on primary and didn't. And Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if he didn't hear or if he hadn't yet switched, or exactly what the circumstances were. It's foggy for me to remember right now because I was focused on something else when this all went down, and I'm only hearing it after the fact. So at the end of the day, he hadn't heard it. So he positioned himself on the opposite corner from where I was positioned, and believed that he was on the Charlie Delta corner of the building. In my mind, he was on the Bravo Charlie corner. So we had rotated the building. In my mind, the building was rotated 90 degrees. So he was on the Bravo Charlie corner. So he's telling me that there's fire coming from the Charlie side of the building. And I'm thinking it's coming from the west wall, when in reality, it's coming from the back wall. Yeah, the south wall. So again, this confusion that was induced by my directions at the very beginning created some things that occurred throughout the rest of the fire. Ultimately, I don't know that it affected our attack, our success, or failure. I don't know that any of those things, I don't know that happened. But it certainly had the potential. And we recognize that as a department that, this isn't good. Okay. So
It compounded a small problem.
yes, that's a fair statement. So
Well, unpackage that a little bit for me, Brian.
Well, the what ended up being the Mayday started as what should have been a manageable small problem that, with better understanding of people's orientation of the building, would have been solved. They were at the main doors to the building, and we'll get into that more, and you can see it in the drawings how everything's laid out. But because Lieutenant Snell knew the building so well, he knew I'm standing here next to the bar. If I turn to my right, 10 feet that way is the front door. And they went to the front door and said, we're on the Alpha side. We need forcible entry. But Alpha to everyone else was the door they came in. So to everyone else, he was on the Delta side door. He needed forcible entry on the Delta side. So no help's coming because they're trying to figure out, well, we're on Alpha. What's wrong? Where are you at? And it was it was very quick. It was a rapid deal. It's not like they were there for an exceptionally long time. It's just, it was kind of compounded that way that, hey, all we should have to do is go open this door, but we didn't know which door to go open.
So, Chief, it's fair to say that a innocently announced, best intended change in orientation of the building was going to end up becoming a contributor to the problems that we're soon to be talking about.
mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So the crews on the interior, what are they reporting as far as conditions on the interior? As far as visibility, heat, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so once David got established, he was assigned to Division Alpha, and he took over communications. So I'll let him get into that.
So the first report that we got from Engine 19, they said, they had made it about 40 feet in the door, and they were already reporting some heavy heat and low visibility, right? And you'll see throughout the rest of this story that their reports sort of degraded as they were going, and it sort of set the tone, and no one really interjected into those communications and started changing stuff in order to address what they were reporting. Fortunately, they did a really, I would say they did a very good job at controlling the situation with their hose line and changing the conditions. But their first report was heavy smoke and heat about 30 feet into the door, about when they hit this raised bar section. And according to Lieutenant Snell, that's where they stopped and opened up the hose line and started putting water up on the roof. The fire, it ended up starting on what? Go ahead.
You mean fire on the ceiling?
Yes, fire on the ceiling. Sorry,
okay. Yeah, you said fire on the roof. I want to make sure everybody understands they're inside.
Yes, inside. Right. There's no fire. No fire visible from the outside yet. That's right.
Okay.
Right.
It's Texas. It's the roof, whether you're inside or outside.
Okay.
Got it. I'll make a note of that for the future.
Yeah. So that was their first report. Something else notable that happened is, we kind of knew we needed to get a lot of water on this fire pretty fast. So with how quickly the engines were coming in, we chose to establish the RIT team with the third end pumper, which was a couple seconds after the second end pumper. That second end pumper started pulling their line, and the firefighter who was pulling the line, was thinking in his head, well, from what I can see, I think the fire's over there, right? So I would say, Atascocita Fire Department, we don't fight a lot of commercial fires like this, right? It's a huge open box. For us, our bread and butter are these 1 or 2 story residential fires. All day, every day, our guys kind of know what they're into, what they're doing, what our guidelines are, how we're going to do that. This firefighter had a really good thought that would have actually unknowingly totally mitigated the situation we did in, which was the firefighter saw our line going in the long direction because it's a big rectangular building. He saw this line going in from the far door on the long direction. He said, well, I'm going to pull this line over to the front door, which is the short side of the building. And if they had opened that door up and gone in, not only would they have been 15 feet away from the fire, but that the door that actually ended up being the door in question that Brian was referring to earlier would have already been open. And we never would have known that we had an issue because they would have just walked right out of the building. Now, it was a tactical call by the lieutenant on that truck, which she was working from her specific frame of reference, right? She said, no, we've already got a door open over here. So they ended up deploying the line one direction, redeploying it back through that front door and following Engine 29's path up to the fire.
Engine 19's
path up to the fire. But when they got in, they started reporting a couple minutes after the first report from inside of the fire. They were also reporting heavy smoke and some heat. And they ended up asking for some ventilation. So that was sort of the way, as we started getting our crews in, that's what we were setting up. That's the way the fire was presenting itself when we started flowing water.
Okay. And then, so 19's now flowing water on the ceiling from their vantage?
Right.
Is it converting? Are you seeing conversion to white smoke from the outside?
The smoke conditions.
Rate the effectiveness of this.
Yeah, so the smoke conditions outside started to improve. When the event occurred, it was somewhat of a surprise to me because things seemed to be going very well. The smoke was converting, it was lessening. We were putting a crew up on the ceiling. See, if you're outside the building, we call it a ceiling. If you're inside, we call it a roof. We were putting people up onto the roof to create that vertical ventilation shaft. And so, everything was hitting. Our mutual aid companies were coming in. We had people in staging. We were backfilling, the on deck positions. I mean, things were clicking relatively well. And through it's in several occasions, and I don't know if you touched on this already, but on at least 2 occasions prior to Jared announcing his Mayday situation, he had called in and given a report that we're getting low on air, so we're going to start to back out. We're moving our hose line. We're doing this. In retrospect, it was indicators that he was headed in a direction that was becoming less tenable. Would you guys agree with that? Brian, you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So says the disembodied voice from across the room who's caught not being in his chair.
Yeah, I'm
but anyway, so so he, but it didn't trigger in any of us. We didn't act on it because it was just a can report. You know, here's what I'm doing. I'm moving here. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. It wasn't a big deal. And
are you
listening to it afterwards, Chief, sounded a lot like the Meadowood Court video that you reviewed a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that were being said that, you know, even if it didn't register in the moment, that after the fact you can say, looking at it, you know, knowing what happened, these were maybe some indicators that things were getting worse and not better inside. Do you remember what was being said?
Well, he called in and said that it was hot and that the heat wasn't lifting. That's when he called for the ventilation. He talked about air, his firefighters' air management or air supply. And this whole thing happened in 15.
It was like at 16 minutes when Mayday terminated. So what it was called.
So the whole thing, I mean, his radio calls, like, they weren't extended over like 30 minutes. They were extended over like a 4 to 6 minute period. You know, hey, it's out in here. We need to get some ventilation, blah, blah, blah. Hey, we're starting to run out of air. We're going to reposition ourselves, or we're going to start working our way out, or we're going to do whatever. And he's talking to David in Division Alpha. So I'm listening and I'm hearing what's going on. But I'm not interjecting because I'm not, you know, that I've got a guy running that division. Okay. The other thing that was happening is I'm sitting in my Tahoe with a headset on. So all of my ambient noise is gone and I can hear everything as if we're sitting here talking right now. David is standing in Division Alpha with a fan running, and well, I don't know if the fan was running yet or not, but with noise, the ambient noise of a fire ground. There's a pumper pumping at 700 or 200 gallons a minute or 200 PSI behind him. So imagine the diesel noise, and there's people coming up to him and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of, can you repeat that? Can you, you know, that kind of thing happening. So there were some disjointed communication associated with that. And so there wasn't a lot of urgency in Jared's voice when he made these calls. It was very matter of fact, typical, you know, hey, I'm a lieutenant and I'm calling you to tell you what's going on kind of stuff. And it didn't really, you know, create that sense in our mind, or at least in my mind as the incident commander, like as the air traffic controller, I'm sitting there listening to all the airplanes and I'm going, well, none of these guys sound like they're really in trouble.
Yeah. So if I can interject there, Jared and I were in sort of hiring classes. We got hired at the same time. I was a lieutenant on his shift before I promoted. And so, you know, we'd made almost all of our fires at Atascocita together. And I wasn't used to hearing these kinds of reports from him. You know, he's very reluctant to get on the radio unless he has something to report. So the fact, my perception of what was going on was a little different from the chief's, which was, I got a report that, hey, we got heavy heat and smoke. I said, okay, well, you know, that's what you'd expect, right? They just walked into this giant building with all the smoke coming out of it. We know there's a lot of smoke. Okay, so there's some heat and they're flowing water, looks like with good effect. A couple minutes later, after they flowed some water on the ceiling for a minute, they advanced their hose line down to the other end of the bar. So, you know, now they're 70 feet into this building. And they start putting water on it. And Lieutenant Snell says, hey, I want to get a little more. I think we're right there. I want to get a little more hose. He backtracked on the hose to try and get a little more slack, and it was caught up on something and he couldn't get it. As he returns back to the firefighter who's been flowing water the whole time, he finds a huge, probably 80 to 100 pound piece of like an air conditioning louver that fell out of the ceiling and actually landed on the hose line where he would have been standing, which, you know, was its own scary piece of information. So he sort of gives a report then, hey, we've got really heavy heat here and we still got no visibility. We need some vertical ventilation. You know, our all of us here were kind of reluctant. We're reluctant to put people on a roof unless we really need to. But from my mind's eye, now I'm getting this second report of heavy heat. He's been flowing water for a little while. And I feel like I'm playing catch up, trying to get ahead of this fire instead of, getting out in front of it and kind of mitigating the situation. I feel like things are progressing and I got to catch up to them. So I've got one crew on deck. That's my RIT team. What I really want to do is I really want to get a crew on the roof to cut a big old hole in this thing and get the heat off of these guys, because that's what they're asking for inside. The roof looks totally tenable from where I'm standing, and I'm trying to figure out a way that we can make some strategic decisions to get ahead of this incident before it gets out of control. In the meantime, given the nature of our response profile, our fourth end pumper hadn't made it yet. So I've got 3 pumpers that are staff, a ladder with a driver only. I'm not going to send my RIT team to the roof, even though I'm itching to. At that time, engine 29 on the second line also is asking for horizontal ventilation, so we get the fan set up, and that starts having an effect on the fire. Yeah.
And they had asked for the back door to be open as well.
Right.
For forcible entry on the Charlie side before they started calling for ventilation. So, and that was me by myself back there, but that was, again, one of those indicators that, man, he's asking for a door to be open. That's weird.
Right.
I got to hit the pause button because David said the fan was having an effect on the fire, and Mike, you gave a rather oddly placed chuckle. So that meant something to me.
Okay.
What did that
So it ties into what Brian had said. We realized when we started the fan that we hadn't softened the building. We hadn't opened up any other exit points. So the only exit points in this building for the smoke was where it was coming out when I pulled up out of the eaves. So we essentially charged this building with fresh air, which created another problem, okay? Because all the smoke had nowhere to go. As soon as Brian got a crew to help force that door in his location, conditions improved 1,000%. Like instantly it went from can't see my hand in front of my face to, oh, hey, look, there's the other side of the parking lot. But we hadn't done that yet. So there were some steps that hadn't, this was probably one fire where I can say, David said it the best, that we, as quickly as I got there, which was within 2.5 or 3 minutes of the dispatch, we were behind from the start. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that we don't fight a lot of commercial building fires. I think some of that has to do with the fact that everybody was down at the other end of the district. I think that some of that has to do with the fact that the fire chief was in command. I think some of that has to do with, there were some things that that I would like for us to have done better and hope that we do better in the future. But timing is always an issue. So our first in mutual aid company is 6 or 7 minutes away. So if they get dispatched at the time of dispatch, you're still looking at 6 or 7 minutes. And most of all of this stuff happened within the first 5 to 6 minutes of the call. It was not a long duration. Hey, we've been on scene for 30 minutes. Hey, we've got companies operating on all floors. We've got people on the roof. We got you, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't like that. All of this, the whole thing was done in 15 minutes. I mean, it was Don Abbott's profile from the get-go. And so you know what you want to do next, but you don't have somebody to go do it. And so Brian's back there with a Leatherman tool and a Phillips screwdriver trying to get the door open on his own, but he's not having any luck because it's a commercial security door. And so they ask for ventilation. We start the fan in the Alpha division. There's nowhere for anything to go. That's why I chuckled, because it came up. I didn't realize that at the time, we've actually talked about this for the Deer Park Fire Department at one of their trainings. We did 2 training sessions with their department to talk about our Mayday. And that's when I heard for the first time that back door actually wasn't open. Or maybe it's not the first time I heard it, but it's the first time that I recognized that it had been said. That, hey, we didn't have anywhere for that smoke to go, and all we were doing was charging the building. So it was super pressurized inside. So there was nowhere for it to lift or go.
Okay. So continue it on.
Okay.
So at this point, we run 30-minute bottles at Atascocita, and they do very well for us, especially considering our bread and butter, those house fires. So at this point, Lieutenant Snell's trying to keep track of his crew. He knows he's got to come out earlier because he's in this big old commercial fire, and he's got longer to go than he's used to. So he looks, and his firefighters at just about a little below half a bottle. He still is not sure where the second line is at this point. And the second line came in and took a right and sort of right-hand searched their way. He went straight in because he knew the building, and they sort of right-hand searched their way to the fire. So they ended up being off to his right. But he didn't know, he's in here experiencing this heat and this smoke, and he's not sure that there's anyone following him up yet. So he decides, hey, it's time for us to get out of here. It's still hot. I don't want to leave my hose line. So rather than just walking back out on the hose line, he and his firefighter have the nozzle, and they're going to turn around and walk the nozzle back out with them and hand it to someone at the door. Mm-hmm. We already had that piece of AC equipment come down. There's a large liquor shelf over the bar that fell down, and then all the chairs were upside down on the bar because they had mopped the night before. So it fell down and knocked a whole bunch of debris over his line. So he and his firefighter ended up fighting this hose probably a little harder than they should have, for a little longer than they should have. But his firefighter got down to about a quarter tank and was on vibra alert. So he radios out and says, hey, I got a firefighter on vibra alert. And he says, I need a means of egress on the alpha side. So I'm looking around. I'm standing on the alpha side, and the alpha side's wide open, because he's still confused and thinks, well, we're now calling the delta side as the alpha side. So he knows, hey, if I go right there, there's a door. I'm good to go. And it's a commercial glass door. They can pop this door in a minute, and we'll just walk out the front door, and we'll be out here ready to recycle and go fight some more fire. So, a judgment call he made, that I don't particularly fault him for because he was in there and I wasn't. But he put down the hose line, took his rookie, and walked maybe 15 feet to the front door and is standing at the front door. Well, he just called me and asked me to send someone to soften up the building on the alpha side. He thinks there's someone coming to open the door, and there's no one coming. I was a little confused about what was going on because he used the word soften up the building. So I was thinking, hey, he's deep in this thing. He wants to make sure that we're opening up doors so that there are means of egress. So when he asked, go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask a question, because soften up the building is not a term that I have familiarity with. So where does that term come from, and is it commonly understood, and what does it mean?
So it's in the Houston area. It's something that we hear Houston Fire Department guys use a lot of the time. And outside in the county, for years and years and years, when we were all volunteer fire departments out here, all of the part-timers that came out here and worked were all city Houston guys. So a lot of that lingo comes out of the city of Houston. And that's one of the charges that their RIT team has, is their RIT team gets on scene, gets all of their equipment there. If there are bars, they're in charge of going and cutting the bars off. They're in charge of knowing what the layout of the building is, throwing ladders, making sure that they have options if they have to go in and perform a rescue. So soften up the building is something that we might, it's a term that we would use in order to say, hey, let's get some of these locked doors unlocked. If there's things that are blocking a means of egress, let's make sure that we get that taken care of. so that if we need to get access later, we've done the legwork and we're ready to go help our guys out.
Okay.
So he uses that terminology. I kind of don't realize he's saying, I need to get out of the building. I think he's saying, hey, I'm pretty deep in here. I'd like to have some options. We're trying, we're coming out now, and we probably need to soften up this building. So Chief Brian Mulligan's working on the Charlie door back there. I'm standing on the Alpha side where he asked for me to open up some doors. So I'm thinking, okay, we're good. In the meantime, he's still standing on what he perceives as the Alpha side, waiting for someone to come open this door. While he's waiting for this door, well, back up a second. When he made entry, he had a little axe, a little flathead axe that, his personal bring from home axe that he liked to carry as his officer tool. He had his thermal imager, and he was with the firemen with the nozzle. So he walked in the door and realized, oh, hey, I didn't put my gloves on. Wait a tick. Puts his tick and the axe down on the bar table right inside the door they made entry to. Mm-hmm. Throws his gloves on real quick, picks up the tick, leaves the axe. So now he's standing at this commercial glass door, which, contrary to popular belief, they're hard to kick out. He doesn't have his axe, and you can actually see his footprints when we started doing our investigation afterwards. You could see his footprints on the door in the soot and the products of combustion on that door. So he's sitting there trying to kick this door out, and he's not getting it. No one's coming to help him, and his firefighters running low on air.
Thank you again to Fire Chief Mike Mulligan, Battalion Chief David Roark, and Battalion Chief Brian Mulligan for sharing your amazing story. Remember that this is part 1 of a 2-part show, so join us again next week for the rest of the story and the powerful lessons learned. In case you weren't aware, this show was launched in 2014 with a purpose: to give a platform to those who've had a near-miss event to share their stories. When I'm on the road delivering situational awareness classes, attendees share amazing near-miss stories. These stories motivated me to launch this podcast, so their lessons learned could be shared with a bigger audience, you. The Situational Awareness Matters show, podcasted as SAMatters Radio, and our companion video program, SAMatters TV, on YouTube, along with other videos that we have posted there, have enjoyed more than 1 million views, listens, and downloads. I am so honored to be able to provide this free platform for these incredible lessons to be shared. If you like the show, please do me a solid favor. Please subscribe. For the audio version of the show, search for SAMatters Radio on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or iHeartRadio. For the video version of the show, search and subscribe to SAMatters TV on YouTube. Since 2007, our instructional team and consultants have helped more than 1,300 organizations and have trained more than 86,000 individuals to improve high-risk decision-making, including fire, police, EMS, industry, military, business, medical, utility, transportation, aviation, energy production, biotechnology, and more. If someone you know works in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then we are here to help to improve their safety and to help them accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home whole and healthy every day to the ones who love them. I'd like to take a moment to honor some of our recent program and consulting clients: the Novelis Corporation in Oswego, New York, Lincoln County Fire Chiefs Association in Denver, North Carolina, and the Sandoval County Fire and Rescue in Albuquerque, New Mexico. If you're interested in attending a program, here's where we're going to be upcoming. January 30th at the Evans Fire Department in Evans, Colorado. February 5 at the Miami Valley Fire and Rescue Conference in Dayton, Ohio. February 7 and 8th at the South Carolina Fire Chiefs Association Conference in Columbia, South Carolina. February 26 and 27 at the Firehouse World Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. March 5 at the Center for Public Safety Excellence Conference in Orlando, Florida. March 10th at the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute's National Fire Service Staff and Command Program in Annapolis, Maryland. March 14 at the Eastern Oregon EMS Conference in Pendleton, Oregon. March 16 and 17 at the Kipsap County Training Officers Association in Washington State. March 25 through 27 at the Behavioral Safety Now Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. If you want to see the locations of all the upcoming events, just head over to our website, SAMatters.com, and click on the red tab labeled Upcoming Events Schedule. The tab is about halfway down the homepage, so just scroll down till you see Upcoming Events Schedule. If you're interested in talking with me about conducting a situational awareness assessment for your company or hosting a training program, just click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage and I'll give you a call. And remember to check out the show notes for how to subscribe to our free newsletter and how to follow us on social media. There we're sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 303 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to Fire Chief Mike Mulligan, Battalion Chief David Roark, and Battalion Chief Brian Mulligan. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. Thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit SAMatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.